We have analyzed the equipment rental process before, and we have identified a number of sources of waste related to the transportation, that is the handovers, between the site engineer, the clerk, and the works engineer. If we apply our redesign heuristics here, we will see that one possible heuristics that comes straight to our mind is to eliminate these handovers. First, by applying heuristics 1 and trying to eliminate the rental request approval for small pieces of equipment, meaning that the site engineer is entitled to approve small equipment purchases. Another way of applying heuristic 1 in this context is to seek to replace the approval, this time of larger pieces of equipment, by empowerment and statistical controls, meaning the site engineers have the power to make the rentals. They are given clear guidelines on when to make the rentals and when not to make the rentals, or when to consult the work engineers before making a rental, and the works engineer perform a statistical control from time to time to check if the guidelines are being followed and if the equipment are being rented in an optimal way. Heuristic 2 tells us to try to compose activities in order to eliminate transportation. In our context, that could mean merging the step of selecting the equipment with checking the availability and creating the rental request. These three activities could be performed at the same time by the site engineer, and the handovers from the site engineer to the clerk to the works engineer could then be reduced. Heuristic 6 tells us to consider the trade-off between having a single process and having multiple variants of the process. Currently, we have a single process that is performed for small equipment and for large equipment. The same sets of approvals are performed for each of them. The same handovers are performed for each of them. But for small rental approvals, we might want to have a much more streamlined approach that allows site engineers to almost instantly get their small pieces of equipment. Whereas for large equipments, we might put in place a different process, for example, a process that is based on pre-approvals and planning, where the site engineer will submit in advance the plan of rental requests that they plan to put during a certain week or a certain month. This could be pre-approved by the works engineer, and based on that, the requests could be already sent to the corresponding suppliers. We see then that for small equipment, ad hoc, and for large equipment, we could put in place very different processes that are optimized towards different performance objectives. Heuristic number 8 tells us to consider optimizing the communication. We see that in this process, once the site engineer has expressed the need for a certain type of equipment, they do not know really what happens with the rental request until the equipment actually arrives. In some cases, that means that the wrong piece of equipment arrives and they have to send it back and get back the correct one. To eliminate this problem, we could consider inserting a task where the site engineer will be informed when the equipment is ready to be dispatched by the supplier. The site engineer will then know specifically what type of equipment will be arrived and exactly when it will be arrived. It will allow them also to be reassured that the process has reached the state they actually wanted it to be in. In this process, one other problem that we have analyzed before is that site engineers, sometimes have to ask for extensions. These extensions in many cases are requested at the very last minute in a hurry and without proper consideration. We could optimize this process by introducing an interaction where the site engineer, 1 or 2 days before the rental of the equipment expires, is actually asked if the extension is required. In that case, the extension request is not left to the last minute and it can run smoothly. Heuristic 9 tells us that we should consider automating the process. For example, by introducing self-service, that could be an improvement idea that will allow the site engineer to directly consult the catalogs of the suppliers to make the selection and the availability check of the equipment, and in a few clicks be able to also create the corresponding rental request, and that will then be routed to any other stakeholders that are involved in the process. Finally, Heuristic 9 tells us to consider automating the entire end-to-end process. In this case, one improvement idea will be to introduce some system that will support the coordination of handovers that occur in this process between, for example, the site engineers, the works engineers, and also the supplier, and later on also linking that to the invoicing that will happen after the equipment has been used. We see then that these redesign heuristics allow us to generate a relatively large amount of redesign ideas. These heuristics are very suitable, for example, for focus groups, workshops, and brainstorming sessions where we will come up with ideas on how to improve the process. As we do this, we might end up with a relatively long and unstructured set of improvement ideas. It is important to try to prioritize these ideas, these improvement ideas, also known as redesign options.